Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and Friends of Baylor. Well, we've got a lot of news this week. Lots of stuff going on, most of which is not useful. We'll see. So my favorite news story this week was the U.S. Energy Department. Let me emphasize that. The U.S. Energy Department concluded, and let me emphasize this also, with low confidence, that COVID was all a mishap from a Chinese lab. Now, I get a kick out of this because none of the other federal agencies who are charged with understanding epidemics and infectious disease, et cetera, changed their minds, but the U.S. Energy Department. But I love the fact that they had to make a statement with low confidence. Now, most of my colleagues, most of the scientists I know still believe this is a spillover event. But let's just think about this intelligently. If it was but we got to think about the next pandemic. If it was a lab leak, then we need to have better lab security. I got no problem with that. So let's do that. But if it wasn't, and it was a spillover event, which most scientists believe, then we got to think about surveillance and vaccine development and better ways to anticipate the next pandemic and be ready for it. Better public health, better tests. So to me, it doesn't make any difference. Let's do both and stop worrying about it. Now, again, I love this. An Idaho bill was introduced that actually would outlaw giving mRNA vaccines. So anybody who did that would have faced misdemeanor charges. So I'm assuming that they will not pass that. But really, if they do, it's just one more state I'm not going to visit. The FDA, this is my favorite story of the week. FDA issued an EUA, an emergency use authorization, to the company Lucira for the first over-the-counter home test for both flu and COVID. Now, Lucira test, I like this one because it was almost like a PCR test. Took a little bit longer, 30 minutes, but that was a test that I would use for the family if we're all getting together because it was the most sensitive. So they approved it, but the company declared bankruptcy. So good luck with that. I feel like I should send them some money or something, but because it was really a great test, and we need a flu COVID test together. That would be very helpful because that's usually the differential diagnosis. Now that RSV is going down, it's always in this time flu or COVID. Another great story. Moderna and the government have finally reached agreement. Moderna owes some money to the government because they have some of the intellectual property for the vaccine, as does Pfizer. So they've agreed to a small amount, $400 million, to pay the government, although they made billions. As a taxpayer, maybe they could send a little bit more. Good news, the National Institutes of Health has started a multi-centered trial looking at a new drug from Japan that is another protease inhibitor. So like Paxlovid, but we need a second drug on the market. This one in particular in preclinical trials looks to be very effective at the variants, inhibiting variants, so I'm really excited. As I'm talking about this, Lily is sound asleep. This kills me. When I talk science, or when I talk anything, actually, she looks like she's dead. Lily, you okay down there? It's unbelievable how boring I can be when I start talking. Anyway, and of course, the most exciting news. The WHO is about to stop its monkeypox emergency, although it's raging in Africa. So remember, we talked about this a few months back. Monkeypox is endemic in Africa, and so there's always 1,000 or 1,500 cases a year that break out there. The reason it became a big health emergency was because it was in Europe and the United States, but that is long since gone. So my sister's at it again. She wants to know, with all this conflicting news, with viruses being here and there and not going away, how are you supposed to behave? What are you supposed to do? Maybe at the end I'll tell you what I do. She's always saying, well, what do you do? And I'm always afraid to tell people because I don't want to say that, I don't follow all the rules. But, it is what it is. All right, so what's going on in the world? Well, the world's looking better. It used to be red, now it's it's still global pandemic. All these places still have it, but it's down. The U.S. is doing better. If you look in the Southeast in particular, it's now coming down. So this is this week's data. You can see the improvement. Hospitalizations are down. You can see hospitalizations falling, particularly in the 70-year-olds. And finally, I've been waiting for this, wastewater is beginning to plateau. Now, when I say plateau nationally, the red is the sites that are reporting a pretty big increase. And there's still a good, 10% of the sites showing a big increase. Orange there is still a moderate increase. So if you look at the red and orange, there's still plenty of places in the country that are going up, while most are going down. So that's part of the problem, is this when it becomes sort of endemic, it's just always around. More and more of my friends are reporting that their kids or their young children are coming up positive for COVID. Not so much in adults these days. I think it's because of the pretty extensive vaccination in the adult, especially over the age of 50, 60. But kids, still very low vaccination rates. So as long as kids are susceptible to COVID, it's going to keep churning and be a lot like other upper respiratory diseases. It churns in the younger, susceptible population and bubbles up and infects the older folks who are susceptible, even vaccinated. And so pretty soon what you'll see is that, like what we're seeing now, hospitalizations mostly in the older, individuals because they have comorbid conditions, but a lot of presence of virus in the younger patients. And it's still, only 16% of the country has gotten boosted, which has been very effective. I don't know why. Virus is around. I'd be getting boosted if you don't have one. The dominant strain is XBB 1.5. We've been watching it increase over time. And finally, it's the dominant strain even in the Northwest. So we watched it slowly move. Now it's 100% in New England, and it slowly moved over. You could always watch it, watch the virus spread slowly across the country, but it is now the majority of the isolates in the Northwest as well. We're doing pretty well in Texas. Our friends in Dimmitt County are just knocking it out of the park. They're doing great, and we're doing well in Harris County as well. In the Texas Medical Center, our test numbers are down under 6.5%. They went down. And then if you look at hospitalizations, 102 per day. Now that looks good. It's not down to where, its lowest time. But if you think about 102 hospitalizations a day times 365 days, that's like 37,000 admissions. Now, 37,000 admissions is a busy hospital year's worth of admissions. So the mere fact that we're still having the equivalent of a busy hospital full of nothing but COVID patients every year is not great. So, it may be going down, but there's still a lot of virus in the community. And of course, this is what I've been a little bit worried about over time. While the rest of the country you can see is going down with wastewater, but there are those ones that are going up. We're the ones going up. So we never hit our nadir. Actually the nadir's down here, but we never hit our low point recently, and it's beginning to plateau. So what that means is we have a lot of virus still in the community. If you look at mortality nationally, it's falling. This is good news. You can see it's been steadily falling. It's now at 2,400 per week. If you translate that to a year, it's like 125,000 deaths per year. But again, think of worst flu season, 50,000 deaths. That's still a lot. And as I've said all along, nothing has changed. The benefits of being boosted are very obvious for severe disease. Tenfold benefit. It's unvaccinated versus boosted. And boosted is better than just being a regular series 2.5 to 3-fold better. So I always like looking at what's going on in new publications every week, but this is my favorite publication of the week. This is in the category of, why didn't I think of that? So we're always wondering about, how does it get from Europe or whatever, Europe or other parts of the world to this country, and we've been focused a lot on, individually testing people and how crazy that would be and difficult it is, and we've all given up on that, all countries. Even China's given up on that. Japan's given up on that. So somebody in the CDC had the smart idea, why don't we just look at the wastewater from the airplane? Now, it's one of those things like, duh. Well, we've been doing this forever, and not one of our scientists thought, like, we should just get wastewater on airplanes. But that was like the smartest, coolest thing I've ever seen. So, of course, it's not good news, but it's very cool. So they sampled wastewater from international flights from the United Kingdom, Netherlands, and France arriving in JFK between August 1st and September 9th of 2022. So let's go back then. Back then, remember, BA4 and BA5 were the dominant variants, not XBB1. So they looked at 80 samples from these planes. 81% were positive. 81%. I mean, and it was exactly the same on each of the 3 flights. I mean, it wasn't 80.2, but it was 81% on all 3 flights. And, of course, it was BA4 and 5. So, first of all, it shows that you can test, but secondly, it shows that every time you get on an airplane, there are people who are going to be positive. We're always wondering about it, but this is pretty obvious. And not surprisingly, you wonder how viruses move between continents. Well, they fly here. I didn't say what airline it was, but they fly here. They all land in JFK, which is why New York, was the big outbreak. Why you go like, why does it New York or Seattle? That's why. So that to me is really interesting. It also shows, you're going to be exposed to the virus no matter what you think. So get vaccinated, get boosted. All right. Other interesting thing. This is a meta-analysis of many studies. It was published in The Lancet. So, these are ways to try to expand the number of patients or samples to see whether or not you get information from looking at big data sets. It's not a new study. It takes 65 studies and looks at the analysis of looking at all those studies. And it's sort of obvious, but it's good information. And what it showed was that if you got infected with those ancestral strains, alpha, beta, or delta, you had a pretty good protection against being reinfected with those strains. But it was not good at being protective against Omicron. In fact, it dropped pretty significantly down to only 30% after about 40 weeks. But, so the good news is if you were infected and got through, you were protected against severe disease very, very highly. So the great protections against severe disease. And this is just a diagram that looks at getting symptomatic disease. The green bar here, the green line, is recovered from infection, and these are vaccinations. And what you can see, it was very effective if you recovered against reinfection with the same strain. But it was not effective if you'd been infected with those ancestral strains against reinfection with Omicron. Well, now we all know this. This is why Omicron took over. It's because it evaded the immunity that was generated by those early strains. So nothing surprising there. The good news, though, is that it protected very strongly against severe disease, even Omicron, and the vaccines did as well. So, this was the argument, like, well, let everybody get infected because it'll be better than being vaccinated. So that's okay, except that we would have had like millions of people die. We'd have millions of people with long COVID. So that's not an effective way to do it. But if you were infected, there was a lot of protection. If you're infected and vaccinated, as we showed a year or two ago, there was even additional benefit. Anyway, so my sister keeps after me, and so I said, this is what I do right now. And oh, by the way, one of our viewers, I asked a question a couple weeks ago that I answered about feeling like she needs a seatbelt. Every time she goes out in the world, what do we do? So I have a mask with me, and if I'm uncomfortable, I'll put a mask on. But by and large, I don't wear a mask anymore. I don't wear a mask indoors. I don't wear a mask when I'm out to dinner. Now, you put me in a theater with a bunch of people coughing, I've got my mask, I put it on. But I think the best way to protect yourself is to get vaccinated and boosted. That, to me, is by far and away. You've got to go, live your life. But if you're vaccinated and boosted, you've done the best you can, and then you'll have to be reboosted again. It's kind of redundant, reboosted again. You'll have to get another booster probably in the fall, along with flu and whatever. Maybe with RSV too, because RSV has just been approved now for people over the age of 60. So lots of positives on the vaccine side. Oh, by the way, got my first hate mail from Connecticut. Somebody was mad at me for saying that vaccines are good. Anyway, want to finish this week with a bunch of shout-outs. First of all, to my colleague at Mount Sinai, Vesna Neifeld, who's been a follower and a good friend over the years. She got the Alumni Special Recognition Award. So congratulations, Vesna. Very proud of you. And then to Nancy Chang, a longtime supporter of Baylor College of Medicine. Nancy's an amazing person, was a faculty member here, a real entrepreneur, started many biotech companies, just has been a fantastic scientist. And we had a symposium recognizing her outstanding work and her support for Baylor College of Medicine. So thank you. We had all the faculty she supported, 10 people, give research discussions. So, she's just fantastic. So thank you, Nancy, and congratulations. And of course, I want to end with this one. You know, many institutions pay professional sports teams to be, to have their logo or to be their doctors. By the way, those teams do not pay the school. People pay them. And so, the Astros and the Texans have some of the big hospitals, advertisement paying them. The hospitals are paying them so they can use their doctors. Well, we do the same. I mean, we do the same. So we, of course, are the sponsor for the Baylor Medicine Unicorns, who are competing in the West U Softball League. So, we've got the best team. We're going all the way. And congratulations to you, West U Unicorns. We hope you take it all the way for the championship. And Baylor Medicine's behind you. Anyway, have a great weekend, and I can't wait to see you next week.